Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The Department of International Relations says U.S. Ambassador Reuben Brigety has apologized for claiming that South Africa sold weapons to Russia. Pretoria has reiterated that it has no record of an arms transaction with Moscow. But with all this, what's the economic impact and global standing for South Africa? For more on this, we're joined now by Professor Chris Landsberg, Chairperson of the African Diplomacy and Foreign Policy at the University of Johannesburg. A very good evening to you, Professor. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we've seen the latest developments. U.S. Ambassador to South Africa apologizing for his public remarks and expressing his gratitude for being given the chance to correct any misimpressions. How should all of this be interpreted? I mean, this is a man who on Thursday said he would bet his life on the accuracy of the assertion he made that South Africa had indeed supplied arms to Vladimir Putin's army.
Typical American, eh? Here is the sheriff of the world. America looks to the world and at world affairs through the lens of friend and foe. As former President Bush put it after 9/11, you're either with us or you're against us. If you're with us, we'll do things for you. If you're against us, we'll show you what we'll do to you. If we really think that that was an apology yesterday, then it will take our naivety that seemed to have crept into our ability to analyze geopolitics to another level. And I agree with Professor Benjiro Evaristo. He apologized for any misinterpretations that he must, but of course almost saying, yes, I agree with you, I stepped over the line. But guess what? It was calculated. It was planned. It enjoyed the sanction of the highest office in the land. He's not going to receive a public scolding from Anthony Blinken, certainly not President Biden. In fact, he's about to be pat on the back and say, well done, because we've reached a point with a country like South Africa, who seemed to want to have its cake and eat it. It wants all the economic benefits from us. It prioritizes economic diplomacy. It says it's concerned about poverty and all these issues in its country. It wants to be at the table. We invite them to the G7, members of the G20. Yet politically, they just can't distance themselves from our arch enemy, Russia, and even China. That was not an apology. That was say, yeah, sorry, maybe I went over the top a bit, but it was planned.
So planned and calculated, you say. I mean, is there some sort of motive behind it, or just an emphasis of South Africa's position with on Russia, Ukraine?
Some very serious motives. That question you're asking is at the heart of what we should focus on. It seems that, first of all, that message was not only done for America and by America. America was also speaking on behalf of NATO, the so-called leader, the leader of the so-called free world. It seems that the irritation with South Africa has now gone beyond that, and it's now reaching a point of alienation. And what they did by single out the purported, the alleged giant in Africa, and do it in such a brazen fashion, was to send a message, not just to us, but to the region and to all of Africa, that any one of you dared do a thing like this, like South Africa, right? Not only siding with our enemy, but give us no gratitude, just go around calling us imperial, which, by the way, America is. America is a democracy at home, yes, but America is a dictatorship abroad. It adopts a posture of do as I say, don't do as I do. But let me come to more serious implications. One of the ministers in the presidency yesterday used very strong language, that South Africa seemed to want to almost induce South Africa into quote-unquote economic warfare. I think that's exactly what America is saying. President Ramaphosa's into the green energy agenda and the just transition agenda and so on. We can bring this to an entire halt, America saying. Here's the dilemma for South Africa. South Africa seemed to be so stuck and nostalgic about the liberatory past and decades that politically it would defend its allies. And by the way, South Africa completely misreads Putin's Russia and what it represents versus the Soviet Union of pre-1991, from which it benefited a lot. The world has moved on. President Putin is certainly not running a socialist agenda, but an ally of South Africa it was. But it says we can destabilize your economy. We can harm. The rand today stands on 19.30. This is difficult. What America is saying to South Africa, choose.
Yeah.
Choose.
Because what we have heard, Professor, Minister Naledi Pandor insisting that South Africa is not going to dump Russia because other countries wanted to do so, also saying that South Africa has historical ties with Russia dating back to the struggle days. Critics have suggested that the South African government will at some point have to change its stance if it wants to save the thousands of jobs tied to the U.S.-AGOA trade agreement, which allows for the duty-free imports of a wide range of items into the U.S. market.
You know, here's the key point. It doesn't have to come to that. And where I do agree with the minister and everybody, South Africa should not dictate South Africa should not be dictated to by America who its friends should be. President Mandela called it during the Mandela era, we believe in a policy of universality. We choose our own friends. But we got ourselves into a corner, as I've said, where in terms of rhetoric, we seem to throw away around this notion of non-alignment, neutrality, and more importantly, we believe in making peace. The real problem with Ambassador Brigety's statement is not just the manner in which you do it. And we place too much emphasis on it, because I'm just saying to you, America is this almost what former French President Hubert Védrine called a hyperpower. They just tell you the way they want to, and so on. The real issue here is, are we non-aligned? Because if there's any veracity of truth that we did give weapons to Russia, then I'm telling you the implication is twofold. We have effectively become a member in this conflict/war. Then any future attempt to claim neutrality and non-alignment is blown out of the water. The attempt here was to delegitimize South Africa's role in the world, to create a credibility crisis for South Africa, which I think it has. There's a lack of confidence in our world affairs. And the question is, when we make bold statements like our value, our posture is non-aligned, let it be substantive. You cannot go and give arms to one of the major antagonists in that conflict and then claim that. Mind you, so much has been made about the analogy between what happened now and Iraq, right?
Yeah.
And how Colin Powell and Brigety behave the same. Let's not forget Libya. Look what America and France did to Libya. They call for a ceasefire. They awash that country with weapons. Libya is a shadow of its former self, more than 12 years ago, utterly destabilized, no consequences. And what does President Biden say about arresting Putin in South Africa? Anybody who dares to tell us they will come after us for human rights violations should not underestimate the consequences that they will suffer. Yeah, South Africa finds itself on the horns of the dilemma.
And very lastly, perhaps very quickly, we know that these comments have sparked a local outcry with questions being raised about the manner he chose to raise the concerns. I mean, you made mention of it earlier. There are still more questions than answers, like why, when there's a state-of-the-art cargo terminal available at Cape Town's port, was a sanctioned Russian freighter allowed to dock at a South African naval base, especially because it's such a tiny base. Why couldn't President Ramaphosa simply ask his defense minister to tell him if he doesn't know what happened with that ship, if, you know, all of it is accurate?
Just allow me just a few sort of seconds to respond, but this is very key.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what the ambassador omitted to say yesterday. I mean, you see, this is how propaganda works. He omitted to tell us, and I'm now going to put it out there and let it be tested by the facts. Last year, 2020, 2017, 2013, 2011, South Africa did U.S. Army, SANDF military training camps in South Africa on our soil with America. Russia sends a ship, they take umbrage. They do exercises with China, they take umbrage. They want to choose for South Africa, they're French. Why would the ambassador omit something like that? You see, what is key about your point, it's not just that this Russian Lady Russia ship docked there, but that port, there's so much strategic importance for the Americans. But here is a question that I want to leave your audience with. Nobody has focused on President Putin's reaction overnight. What does President Putin do overnight while we focus on the ambassador's reaction? The Kremlin, not an ambassador in Washington or in Pretoria, the Kremlin releases a statement saying, by the way, we had an extensive call, my friend Cyril Ramaphosa and I, and they released gory details basically saying the South Africans confirmed we are the ally economically, politically, and so on. So even they are cornering South Africa now. And on the idea that President Putin should join the BRICS summit in August virtually, guess what President Putin said to our president? You dare do that, then there will be consequences for you from Russia as well.
Wow.
There are prices and consequences for our choices.
Yes, absolutely.
And the problem sits with us.
Very well. Thank you so much for that insight. Thanks for sharing that with us. Professor Chris Landsberg of the University of Johannesburg, speaking to a story that is not going away anytime soon.